Hello, everyone. My name is Moshe Nave. I'm from the SAP Community team. Today we have Kevin and Jordan from the SAP Cloud SDK product management team, and they will give us another SAP Community Call as a part of the series. Today it will be, as you can see on the screen, on JavaScript Linting with SAP Cloud SDK for continuous delivery. So Kevin and Jordan, please take it away.
Thank you, Moshe. Hello from my side. This is Jordan speaking from the Cloud SDK team. And as Moshe already announced, today we'll have a session about continuous delivery and especially on the JavaScript linting as part of the continuous delivery pipeline. Before we move on to the content, I want to highlight the one and only forward-looking statement. Please make your investment decisions based on what's generally available and not based on forward-looking statement that we might make today. We do not guarantee that everything that you see today will be generally available. First of all, let's start with the overview of Cloud SDK. If you're joining this call for the first time, you might be interested in what we are doing. And this is shown on this picture here. You see three red markers. First of all, the Cloud SDK, which is part of an SAP Cloud Platform application, which is hopefully a cloud native application. Here we see that the Cloud SDK helps to connect to SAP solutions like S/4HANA, Qualtrics, SuccessFactors, and others. We provide some client libraries and also some generators for different endpoints of SAP solutions. Then looking to the bottom, what the SAP Cloud SDK also provides is libraries for easy access of services that are provided using the SAP Cloud Platform. A good example for such a service could be the Extension Factory or any other business services that are delivered on the platform itself. Both libraries are available for Java and JavaScript components, so that you can use the Cloud SDK on the stack of your choice. Having a look to the right, we see SAP Cloud SDK for continuous delivery, which is also today's topic. And here we offer a toolkit that allows to easily and reproducibly build and deploy your applications to the SAP Cloud Platform. We see something, some additional information on continuous delivery in a minute. Before we get started with the JavaScript linting part, let's have a brief overview on what happened recently. Here you see the three components that I mentioned. First of all, the libraries for Java, the libraries for JavaScript, and the continuous delivery toolkit. And having a look on the Java side, what we were working very hard is to make improvements on the recently announced OData v4 support. As you know, OData v4 is getting more and more adoption in the SAP ecosystem, and not only in the SAP ecosystem, but also in other products, so that it's quite important to have this support. Additionally, we introduced a way to make more granular resilience configuration, so that you can directly configure resilience for J, which is the library that we use for resilience under the hood. Last but not least, Swagger support was added as part of the Open API initiative, where SAP is also part of. Swagger is one of the formats that now are possible to be used for generating OData clients, and not only OData clients, but obviously also other type of clients. On the JavaScript side, beside of improvements in the existing OData client generator, we are very happy to announce that right now we already have released an experimental support for OData v4. The release happened only a few days back, so stay tuned for additional information on how to try out the new features. And if you start playing around with the OData v4 support, keep in mind that it's still experimental, which means that APIs might change. So yeah, keep this in mind. On the continuous delivery side, we also have some improvements here. For example, Sonar Cube scans for all branches, which means that right now you can have your different branches of your repository scanned. Also, the artifact deployment stage is capable to deploy to NPM, which is standard NPM publish, which means that things like NPM ignore and other configurations are also considered automatically. And last but not least, today's topic, JavaScript Linting, which will be shown by Kevin in a minute. It's also one of the recent improvements. Okay, what we will see today. First of all, Kevin will provide an overview about continuous delivery and linting, a small introduction on what these terms mean and why we are doing it. Afterwards, we'll see a nice demo, how this is supported by SAP Cloud SDK. And finally, in the conclusion part, we'll ask you for some feedback. We have prepared 3 small questions that you can answer, and we'll be happy to receive your feedback and to learn more about what you are needing and what you are building. Having said this, I hand over to Kevin to move on to the linting part.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, and hi everyone. Also from my side, my name is Kevin, and I'm a developer for the Cloud SDK for continuous delivery. And now I should first of all share my screen. Just a second. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen now. So as Jordan already said, today I will talk about the latest developments of the linting capabilities that are part of the Cloud SDK pipeline. But before diving into that, I'm first of all giving you a brief overview of the Cloud SDK for continuous delivery and the value it offers. So in general, the Cloud SDK for continuous delivery provides a toolkit which consists of 2 components. So the first component is the Cloud SDK pipeline, which is basically an automated sequence of steps that is applied to the application whenever there are changes to it. And a simple pipeline might, for example, compile your application to ensure it's syntactically correct, run tests to verify its behavior, and deploy it to SAP Cloud Platform if all the checks are passed. The second component of the toolkit is the codified infrastructure that is required to run this pipeline, and it describes everything that we have built to make the continuous delivery pipeline work in the user's environment. And the largest part of this codified infrastructure are Docker images, which are used to run Jenkins and build tools such as Maven and NPM. And for those of you who are not familiar with Jenkins, Jenkins is an automation server for tasks like building, testing, or deploying software. And the continuous delivery toolkit also provides a lifecycle management script, which allows you to easily set up such a Jenkins server, which is what I've also used to prepare the demo for today. And by heavily relying on Docker, it is also simple to reproduce the environment we have prepared. So all in all, the goal is to provide everything you need to get started with a continuous delivery workflow without much need for configuration. And on this slide, you can see an overview on the structure of the Cloud SDK pipeline. And this figure, you need to read it from left to right. So on the left, you see the start of the pipeline. And first of all, the pipeline will be initialized, and then the application will be built. After that, you see this sort of drop-down list of different stages that are executed. These are local tests, like for example, integration tests or unit tests. And also what you can see here is the linting stage, which is the topic of today's session, which is also executed here. And all of these that are visualized in this sort of drop-down list are stages that are executed in parallel, and by using parallelization wherever possible, we also optimize the pipeline for performance. So now let's get to the topic of today's session. And for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of linting, I'm going to give a brief overview now before we are going to have a look at what the Cloud SDK pipeline offers. So, okay. So first of all, what is linting? Linting in general is a method of static code analysis, which aims at finding problematic parts of source code to discover potential bugs. And for example, an example you can see here on the slide is if you use an assignment operator instead of a comparison operator in an if statement, for example, this would be something you can discover with the use of linting. What you could also do or use linting for is to enforce certain code style guidelines throughout the development team, like enforcing certain naming conventions or a certain style of comments or something like that. And why is linting useful? So the answer to that question is that especially in interpreted programming languages like JavaScript is very useful, since there we don't have a compiling phase which could execute similar tasks prior to the execution of a program. So usually you would have to execute the program to find these bugs or errors if you do not use linting. So now let's have a look at what the Cloud SDK pipeline offers. And as part of the automated quality checks, the pipeline supports several options for the integration of linting of Java or TypeScript projects. But before diving into the capabilities of the pipeline, I want you to imagine a scenario where you do not have these automated quality checks like linting in place, and you're only able to detect software bugs or errors after you've already deployed the application. And in such scenarios, users might experience downtimes or software which is not behaving as anticipated due to undiscovered bugs. And the resulting downtime and rollback of the faulty software can also lead to high costs, and it requires a lot of manual efforts from the maintainers to fix those bugs. So the benefit for the users of the pipeline is that all the qualities are checked automatically as part of the pipeline before the application is deployed. So now let's have a deeper look on what the pipeline offers. And in general, the pipeline offers 3 different options for linting, which I will also present in the demo later. And the first option is an option where you do not need to provide any configuration at all. So the pipeline will automatically execute everything here. And in this case, it would run ESLint, which is a widely used linting tool for JavaScript and TypeScript projects, together with the general purpose configuration that is shipped by the pipeline. And this option is especially useful for users that do not have a lot of experience with linting, but that still want to leverage the benefit of automated quality checks in their pipeline. But we also, of course, have options for more advanced users. So the second option would be for users that might already be aware of linting and might already use ESLint, but they don't have custom requirements that would require any custom linting scripts. So in this case, the pipeline would use an existing ESLint configuration if the user would provide it as part of their project to execute ESLint with. And the last option would be the one for the most experienced users, or for the ones that really need that, or that really have custom linting requirements. And for those kind of users, we give the full control of the linting process by enabling the user to provide a script named CLint as part of their package JSON of the project, which will then be executed by the pipeline. And that's it for the theoretical part of this presentation. So now let's jump over to the demo part. And for that, I'm going to close this presentation. So that's okay. Now, Okay, so first of all, we're going to see all the three different options that I've presented to you. So we will start off with the linting option where you do not need to configure anything in the pipeline. So for that, I've already generated a project that you can see now here with the Cloud SDK for JavaScript. So it allows you to already generate projects. And in this case, we have generated a TypeScript project. It will already provide you with a certain structure that you can see on the left here. So there will already be directories for your source code or for the tests that you have to write. And it will also already come with configuration for the Cloud SDK pipeline. That's what you can see up here. So there's already a configuration file for the pipeline. And it will also generate a Jenkins file, which is used to load the Cloud SDK pipeline later on in the Jenkins server. But for today, we do not need to touch any of these pre-generated files. We leave everything as it is. But of course, if you have certain project requirements, you might need to configure it in the corresponding files. Apart from that, the only thing I have changed for today's demo is that since the generated projects already come with an ESLint configuration and a linting script defined in the package JSON, I've deleted both of them just for the sake of the demo today. So first of all, to later on find something with the linting tool, we are going to introduce a simple bug here, and it will be the one that I've already shown you on as an example on the slides. So what we'll do is we'll create a variable, assign it a value, and in the if statement, we will introduce the error that we use an assignment operator instead of the comparison operator. So we'll also copy this return into the if statement. And of course, this is a very simple example, and I think most of us are able to see that the problem of using the assignment operator instead of the comparison operator in such a small application. But the interesting thing about this example is also that if you would just test the application for its behavior, you would not really notice this bug, since this expression will always be evaluated to true. So it will anyways return hello world as we would expect it, even though we have this error here. And in larger applications, such bugs are of course a bit more difficult to detect if there are more lines of code than we have right now. So another thing that I've already set up for the demo today is a Git repository for our application, because we need it for the Jenkins server. So what we do now is we just commit and push the changes that we have made with our small bug here. And another thing I've already prepared for the demo is a Jenkins instance, and I used the lifecycle management script that is provided with the Cloud SDK for continuous delivery. I've already set this one up beforehand because it just takes a bit too long for the demo, but I wanted to at least show you on how you can create a job in Jenkins. So what we'll do is we'll just add a new item, give it a name, create a multi-branch pipeline, which is useful if you might want to run the pipeline on multiple branches. For this demo today, we just have a master branch. But anyway, so now we will just copy in the link to the GitHub repository, and we'll also select the credentials, because if we specify credentials, we can use the GitHub API without restrictions, and I've already specified those before the demo as well. So now Jenkins will scan the repository for the different branches that we have, and it will detect the master branch that we have, and it already triggered the build for us. So while the build is running, I will just quickly go through the Jenkins UI for those that are not that familiar with Jenkins. So this overview that we can see now is the standard version of the Jenkins UI. And here we can now, for each build, click on the build. We will now later, as soon as the different stages are executed, they will be visualized here so that we can always see the progress of our build. And we can now also click on it and have a bit more details for the specific builds. And Jenkins also offers a second UI, which is called Blue Ocean. We can also open that one so that you can see it. So this one basically gives you the overview on the progress of the pipeline for all the different stages, like I've shown you in the slides already. And what you can do here is basically you can click on the different stages, for example, the init stage, and then below you will find the corresponding log output for that stage. So this is a nicer way to browse the logs of the pipeline if you need to. And yeah, so now let's get back to this overview, and then I will just quickly go back to another slide I wanted to show you to give you a bit more of the details of what is going on internally in the pipeline. So in general, when the pipeline starts to execute, it will first, or execute the lint stage, then it will first, as part of the lint stage, check if you have a script name with the name CI lint in your package JSON. And if yes, it will execute the script. So there you could basically define any type of linting tool that you want, which would then be executed by the pipeline. But for the case that we are showing right now, we did not define such a script. So then the pipeline will check, okay, is there an ESLint configuration as part of your project? And if you have one in your project, the pipeline would execute ESLint using the configuration file that you have specified. And we also did not do that. So in the third case, then the pipeline would execute just ESLint with the general purpose configuration that is shipped with the Cloud SDK pipeline. And yeah, just to again mention who should use what. So basically, the option that we are seeing right now, the one where we just use the general purpose configuration, is the one for those users that really are not that familiar with the linting and just want to have a basic form of linting to still leverage the automated quality checks as part of the pipeline. And the second option, so basically providing an ESLint configuration as part of the project, is like a bit in between. So it's always a trade-off between the requirements that you have and how much efforts you want to put into configuration of the pipeline and customizing everything, etc. And yeah, the last option of providing a CI lint script will then basically give you full control over the linting process, but of course it also requires a bit more work and maintenance efforts. And what we can see on the left now is that the build is already succeeded. So what we can see in this overview now is on the bottom, we'll see the warnings that were generated by ESLint. So we can also click on them. And what we'll see then is, on top we have a bit of analytics, but this is, we will see later on if there's more than one build, how this evolves, and then it's also a bit more useful. On the bottom, you can see now the different findings. So for each finding, we'll have basically an entry in this table, and what we can see here is in which file we found something and in which line of code. And on the right, we can see the rule which was violated by the code. So then we can also click on the findings, and what we can see then is the the expected detection of the error that we have introduced. So here the message is that we used an assignment instead of the comparison operator. And so then we have another finding, which is basically in the same line of code. We also, it was reported that we have an unexpected constant condition, because this will always be evaluated to true. So this was also another detected problem here. So now let's get back to our project, because now it's time for the second option that I wanted to show you. So for this one, we will now provide a custom ESLint configuration as part of the project. So what we'll need to do for that is just simply creating a file, which is named ESLint RC. And this can be provided either as a JSON or also as JavaScript if you're, if you prefer that. But yeah, for the sake of the demo, we'll just stick with JSON as I think it's more readable for everyone. So before going into the details of what we have described here in our configuration, let's quickly start the build first of all. And for that, we'll just commit and push the changes again. And as soon as this is done, we can get back to our Jenkins instance and retrigger the build. And while this one is running, we'll now have a look at the configuration so that you're also a bit more familiar with how ESLint works and how it's configured. So basically in the beginning, what we have specified here is the environments property. And this one in there, you basically define the different, let's call it frameworks that you use. So in our case, it is a Node.js project. So we set the node property to true and we use the Jest testing framework. So we also set this one to true. And the purpose for this one, for ESLint, is that we just want to make ESLint aware of the global variables and the characteristics of the frameworks so that there are less false positives in the findings. And the third property here is setting the ES language level. So we can set it to anything we want, but in this case, we have just set it to the latest version. The root property here specifies for the given configuration that it resides in the root of the project, because in ESLint you can also distribute configurations throughout your project. So for example, you could have a separate configuration for the source directory and another one for the test directory. And for the configuration that resides in the root, we just have to set this property to true. The next property is the parser property. Since we have generated a TypeScript project, we need to select the TypeScript parser. And for that, we'll also have to specify a plugin. The last property is the extends property here, which is basically used for shared configurations. And in this case, it is used to import certain rule sets. So in this case, we'll import the recommended rule set from ESLint and also the recommended rule sets from the TypeScript ESLint plugin. And the reason we are doing it is that because ESLint by default does not use any rules, so no rule is enabled if you do not specify anything. And the last possibility from the general configuration perspective would be to also define per rule properties. So you could, for each rule, for example, disable them or set the warning level differently. So you can, for example, set certain rules to the level of error if you think they are more severe, or you can set them to warning if you think they are less severe. And we will see this one later on in the last example when we define our custom lint script, and I will also show you how that one works. And now, in the meantime, the build is already almost done. So we'll just need to wait one more second. And there we have our results. So again, we can see here the results that were generated from the linting tool. And what we can now see, what's also interesting, is that we have an additional warning here. So let's check it out. And now what we can see here is another violation in the line 6 of the same module where we introduced our error. And if we click on it, we'll see that a rule of the TypeScript ESLint plugin was violated, where it says that, since we assigned the value to X, but we never use it, it reported this warning. So the reason why we have the additional warning here is that the Cloud SDK provided configuration is a bit less strict to just highlight potential bugs or errors in your code and not generate too much warnings that might not be relevant for you. So now let's head on to the next option, or also the last option provided by the Cloud SDK pipeline. And for that one, as I already mentioned, we'll update our ESLint configuration so that we also see how the rules property works. And in this case, what we'll do is we will disable two of the findings that we had. So basically, we will disable the first finding and also the last one, just for the sake of the example here so that you can see how it works. And now the only thing we need to do in addition to that is to go to our package JSON and define a CI-lint script. So we'll just define script here called CI-lint. And what we can do now is basically use whatever linting tool we like. For this demo today, we'll stick with ESLint. And the only requirements that are there from the pipeline point of view is that we expect the report to be in check-styled XML format, and that the report is written to a file which is named CILint.xml. But basically, you can also provide any prefix you like. So the pattern star CILint.xml is accepted. And you can also place it wherever you want in your project. So you can also create a separate folder for the findings if you prefer that. That is no problem. And in addition to that, we will now specify also the files that should be linted by ESLint. So you can specify it in the beginning here. And for example, we can restrict ESLint to only lint files that are in the source or test folder and all of its subdirectories. And then we'll restrict everything to TypeScript files. Since we have a TypeScript project, we can easily do it like this. And as I already mentioned at the beginning, the Cloud SDK for JavaScript already comes with an ESLint configuration and also linting script defined here in the package JSON. That's why also the dependencies are already placed. Otherwise, you would, of course, need to provide or update the dependencies according to your definition of the CI-lint script. So again, we'll push the changes and we will get back to our Jenkins instance to retrigger the build. And as soon as it's running, perfect. So now we'll have a look at another benefit that comes when defining your custom CI-lint script. And the benefit is that you can now, so here I'm just in the folder of the project. And if you're now here, you can just use npm run to run the script that you have defined. So you can run it locally. So in case, for example, you have some findings in the after the pipeline run and you debugged the related source code, you can also test locally if all your changes resolve the findings that you had. So we can just execute the script, and if we'll check for the files, we'll also see that the report is generated. Don't be confused here by this error that is generated by npm. This is just due to the fact that ESLint returns a non-zero exit code whenever there is a finding marked as an error. So in that case, it will just return exit code 1, and this is why npm now just returns this error here. So now we can go back to our project and also have a look at the XML file that was generated by ESLint. So if we reformat it, we can now also see here that for the given file that we edited, we have one warning, which is marked as an error. And again, the same error message we have seen before. And yeah, of course, here in this XML representation, it's a bit less readable. So we can now also get back to our Jenkins instance to then again have a look at the findings. But before having a look at the findings, I want to show you another bit more technical part of the pipeline. So we can also check the logs of the pipeline to see the differences in the execution of the linting stage. So what we can do is if we now go back to the Blue Ocean UI and click on the linting stage and have a look at the logs, we will also see the invocation of ESLint directly here. So what the pipeline did here was to just execute ESLint, run it on all the files of the project. Again, use checkstyle XML format for the report, output the report to the file with a given name. And in this case, ESLint used the configuration file that was provided with the project, and ESLint has a built-in mechanism to resolve the configuration, so we don't need to specify it in the command here. And the last option that we set here is the ignore pattern flag, which is similar to what we have seen when defining the CR-lint script. So you can either specify the files to be linted in the beginning here, and then explicitly excluding some files with this flag, or you can already restrict it in the beginning. So that's up to you how you define it. And in this case, we just ignore all the node modules that are in the project. And if we now get back to the last build where we had the CR-lint script, we can also just quickly jump into the logs to see the differences. And in this case, we see that the pipeline just executed basically the same command that we executed locally. So it also uses npm run to run the CR-lint script, and just with the additional silent flag set here, just to avoid the npm output in the pipeline logs. So now we can also get back to the build, and we'll see the results here. So now, as expected, we only have a single warning, which is the one that we expected from the error that we introduced. And we see also that that turning off the rules has worked with our configuration. And yeah, so that's basically it for from the demo of today. So I hope it was interesting for you. And if you want to learn more, we also provide some links on the slides here. So first of all, you can check out the documentations on how to get started with the pipeline with this link up here. And below you will find the links also to the GitHub repositories. First one for the Cloud SDK for continuous delivery, and the second one, so basically the first one is for the Cloud SDK pipeline, and the second one is for the CX server. So this is the lifecycle script, lifecycle management script for Jenkins that I have mentioned, which I've also used to set up the Jenkins server for today's demo. And before opening up for questions, I just want to point you to some more resources on how to get started with the Cloud SDK in case you're interested. And maybe you're also about to start cloud development, and of course also information on how to contact us. So first of all, we have provided an open SAP course where we talk about cloud native development and about the different functionalities of the Cloud SDK. And then following all the links down here on the slide, we also provide a lot of tutorials in the SAP Tutorials Navigator, where you can earn badges and also do more tutorials and getting more advanced. And then we are also present on the SAP community space with some interesting blog posts, but also in the questions and answer space, of course, if you have any immediate questions about what you saw today or about the capabilities of the SAP Cloud SDK, you can also use the mailbox that you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can either use this one to contact us, or also if you want to earn points on Stack Overflow, you can also, of course, ask the question there. And another thing before opening up for questions now would be that we would kindly ask you to answer some questions. So I have opened up a poll now for you with a few questions so that we get a bit more insights on how you're using continuous delivery, if you're using it already. And yeah, so I hope everyone can see. Okay, yeah, the first votes are coming in. So yeah, now first of all, thank you from my side for joining today's session. And now we can open up for questions if you have any.
We have one question from Theo. Where can we find the presentation and recording? It will be available in a couple of days, maybe 24 hours, in the SAP Community Calls page.
Okay, I will leave the poll open for those that have not filled it out yet. And yeah, with that, I would give back to Moshe for the closing if there are no more open questions. Then thank you everyone for joining today.
Thank you very much. And like I said, the recording will be available in the SAP Community Calls page. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye-bye.